Hi, this is Kathi Quinn with Floriani. Floriani is a division of R&K Distributing, and I want to welcome you to this week's Project of the Week. I was at Mulqueen's in Phoenix, Arizona this weekend, and we had an amazing hands-on event. Lots of fun, lots of food, lots of chocolate. It was just a great time. But I had some questions, and sometimes these questions make me realize how some of the most basic functions in the software are somehow missed. So we're going to do some basics today, but I think they're going to be a lot of fun and real important. Let's say we want to make a zipper bag, and maybe we're going to make it on our serger, or we're going to make a larger bag, but we need components of maybe quilted fabric. And we don't necessarily like the fabric that's out there. We would like to create our own. Well, it's very simple in Floriani software, and I'm going to show you 2 or 3 ways we can do things. Now, of course, your limitation is always going to be that hoop. The size of your hoop will always be the limitation as far as what can I do. So think first about your hoop size. So what I will do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to show my hoop. Now I can come right below that. This is on the bottom of the left-hand toolbar. I left mouse clicked on the hoop icon, and that tells me what the last hoop I used was, or I set. So now I'm going to come down to the icon just below it, and I'm going to set my hoop. Now I'm not going to use my 4x4 hoop. I'm going to come in and I'm going to use my large hoop. And I'm going to say OK, and this is my largest hoop right now that's for my machine. So you get to pick whatever size hoop, and if it doesn't have the hoop in there, you can create a custom sized hoop. So now that I have an idea about my hoop, now I can start deciding how much fabric I want to create. Well, I want to create a lot because I want to make a little bit larger bag. So the first thing I'm going to do, if I'm not creating this all in the hoop and all I'm doing is creating my quilted pieces so I can make a larger bag than my hoop will afford me, or I want to use the serger for finished edges, whatever, we're going to work on it here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the top to my artwork tool. Now remember, this is vector artwork. I'm going to left mouse click on the rectangle, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just almost fill my hoop, because remember, no hoop can embroider right to the edge because the foot will hit the edge. So now I have defined a space. Now this is artwork. Remember, if I grab it, I know it's artwork because my properties box right here on the right hand side says, Kathi, you're working with artwork. If I filled it in, you'd see exactly what I'm talking about. So this is nothing but a piece of artwork. So now's where the fun comes in. Now a lot of us, and one of my favorite types of fill is nice little cross hatching. I like that. So I'm going to come down to my bottom toolbar over on the far right. We've got cross stitch, we've got stipple. Okay, so now I'm not going to fill it with cross stitch obviously, but I could fill it with stippling if I so choose. So I could click on stipple. Now it's going to be a tight stipple in here, and it's a very large area, so it's going to take a moment for my software to generate it. But I'm going to show you a real cool thing to do with stippling once we first get it in here. And I'm going to tell you, it's a lot of area, and this stipple is set default to like micro stipple, as you can see. This is 2.5 millimeters apart. That is less than 1/8 of an inch. That's really tiny. So I actually prefer my stippling. My stitch length at 3 is fine. Sometimes I might change it up to 3.5 depending on what fabrics or filler I'm going to put under my fabric. But I'm going to change my density to about 1/8. Let me see how that looks. Now that looks much better to me. So what I'm going to do with this right now is I'm going to come back down to that stipple icon, and you see that little down arrow? I'm going to left mouse click next to it, and I'm going to say Save Preset. Now you're going to notice I have 6, 7, and 9. Those are the densities. I just named them short. So now I'm going to save a preset that also has 8. And that way I can go down there and pick that preset right away. Not only will it fill quicker because it's not so dense, I very rarely use that tiny stippling. So here's one way we could quilt for our bag. If you wanted a regular stippled look, you could do this. Now there's a couple of things I can do. Now with this, I would put batting under it, and I could put my backing fabric underneath the hoop. Now there's even two ways for that. Now if I'm going to wash this fabric prior to using it, and a lot of times if we're stippling and we want it to have that quilted look, sometimes we want that effect already done before we construct our bag. We don't necessarily want it to shrink up afterwards. And it doesn't shrink much, but you know as well as I do, if you're using cotton batting and cotton fabric, you're going to have some shrinkage in there. So what I like to do is I'll put Wet and Gone in the frame. Lay it, hoop the Wet and Gone, which is a totally water-soluble stabilizer. Then I will lay my back fabric on top of the stabilizer, wrong side looking at me, wrong side up. Then I'm going to lay my batting and my top fabric on, and then I'll run a base stitch around to hold everything in place. So now in this case, what I could do is I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste, and this second one, I'm going to just go ahead and change the color of, and I'm going to turn it to a simple run stitch with about a 3 millimeter stitch length. Now I obviously would want to base that fabric down to the hoop prior to stippling, so I'm just going to drag this and drop this at the top. So my basting line would stitch out and hold that fabric down, and then it would go ahead and stipple all the fabric. Now that's a way I could do some stippling. And since I'm going to wash it anyway, I've got the Wet and Gone on the back. When it washes away, I'll be perfect. I'll have a beautiful piece of stippled quilted fabric. Now I can use this in a bag. I could use this in a pillow top. There's a million things you can do with this. Now the next thing I might want to do, so let's undo as our friend. Let's get rid of, I'm going to put this back up, and I'm not going to undo. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to move this back up to the top. I'm going to go ahead and just select the stipple, and I'm going to say, you know what? I really want a motif fill, and I'll show you why. Now if I come down to my motif fill and click on it, it's going to fill with a motif, and I got tons to pick from. But I happen to know I really like my diamond quilting, and I have this set at a 1-inch diamond pattern. So now when I come in with that, there is my nice beautiful cross hatching quilting, and this looks really nice on bags. It looks really good. So now I could put the batting in, or a lot of times with this diamond quilting, what I like to use is our Floriani So Fab Foam. Now So Fab Foam, there we go, if I say it 20 times, is fusible on one side. So what I would do is I would fuse either my top or bottom fabric, it really doesn't matter. I'd probably fuse my top fabric to it. Then I would do the same type thing in the hoop. If I was going to wash it, I would put the Wet and Gone in the hoop. Then I would lay my backing fabric, wrong side looking at you, and then I would center my foam with the fused on piece of fabric. And again, I would go ahead and base this down, and then I would use my cross hatching. Now I love foam in bags, especially if it's going to be a bag that you might carry a cell phone in, you might carry a camera in, you might have some electronics, even eyeglasses, so you can have some real protection. This foam is nice and squishy, but it's kind of hardy, so it's going to give you a lot of protection. So that's another way. Now here's something that's a lot of fun. We're going to take this same fill, only I'm going to go back here and I'm going to look at different motif fills. And I'm going to look at one that's kind of open. Maybe, let me look through and get something that I think will be fun. Let's take this F016 here. Now, let's see what it looks like. Let's just apply it. Now I've got this set at 1 inch, so that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to take Floriani Sew and Shrink, and I'm going to put it on top of a piece of light fusible fleece. Okay, we have fusible fleece light. Now I'm not going to fuse that fleece at this point. So what I would do, again, if I want to make a quilted fabric top and bottom, nothing's going to change. We're going to hoop Floriani Wet and Gone. We're going to lay our backing fabric wrong side looking at us. We're going to lay our fusible fleece with the fusible facing down, but we haven't fused it yet. Then we're going to put our top piece of fabric I'm sorry. Then we're going to put our Floriani sew and shrink fabric on top of the fusible batting that we have not fused on, and our fuse is facing the bottom. And now we're going to lay our top fabric on. And we're going to go ahead and we can go ahead and baste this down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a decorative pattern. Something like this. There's lots of them to pick from, but I want an open pattern. I want to change it to a large pattern size. This one's at 1 inch because this held, since I'm just changing patterns, because my diamond was at 1 inch. And you could go through, and I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of open patterns that you could pick, and at 1 inch they're going to do a good job. This one's still a little bit too close for me, so I would probably set this one at 35 millimeters, which is about 1 inch, almost 1.5 inches. So we can come in and you can use a lot of these open patterns and have some real fun. So what's going to happen? Let's look at maybe this one. Again, I can come in and change these like I like them, get one and get a nice big pattern. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew this out, but now I'm going to take it to the ironing board. And the first thing I'm going to do, and it's stitched through the top and the bottom, we know that. Before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to shrink the fire out of it. I'm going to hold my iron where it's just barely touching, kind of skimming more or less. It's not really pressing, it's skimming. And I'm going to put that steam in it like mad. Now I happen to love Laura Star irons. They have great steam. That Laura Star Plus, that's the little pop-up iron, is fantastic. I have a big system and I have my pop-up, and my pop-up sits next to my machine so I don't have to get up and go put the big system on all the time. But you're going to steam the fire out of this and it's going to shrink up 30%. So now you have not only given some protection, you have made a wonderful textured fabric to now use. This also looks cute in little kids' clothes. You can use some of these patterns and cut your bodice panel out and it looks like you've been smocking. There is so much you can use, and you can put this on top of a poly batting or our Heat and Stay Fleece Light to kind of give you a different look. You can do this with silk. You can do this. You can't do it with super heavy fabrics. You couldn't do it with a brocade. You couldn't do it with a really heavy raw silk. But you can do it with a dupioni. You can do it with the satins. You can do it with a lot of those type fabrics. And it really looks good when you're going to make a bag and you want to dress it up and you want to use a really nice fabric. Or you want to texture a pillow top, or you want to texture part of some clothing. This is how you do that. And this is simple, simple, simple. But people seem to be they were real confused at this type of step. All we want to do is make fabric. Why can't we make it using our sewing machine? People like to do those scarves. I never did my scarf by free motion quilting all over it or sewing a grid. You know what I did? I took Floriani Wet and Gone Tacky, put that in the hoop sticky side up. Then I took all my yarns and stuck them down to the hoop. Then I took one of these pretty patterns and I just embroidered over the top of it. And you know, you can embroider in a metallic thread or a contrasting thread over this yarn and it's gorgeous. Or you can use a thread that blends and you can make a scarf as long as you want and as wide as you want. Really, all you're doing is you just keep marching down and rehooping and marching down, because it doesn't have to be exact matching up the pattern, because really it's all falling into the iron and everything. That's a way to make those beautiful scarves, and they are gorgeous. People love them. So get yourself some fun yarns, some novelty yarns, and stick them all down to a piece of Wet and Gone and make a solid piece of yarn look like a scarf, and then come in here and use this same exercise to stitch that all together. One of our educators did a beautiful table runner. And what she did is she used yarn in this fashion and she cut that out. She ironed Dream Weave Ultra on the back once it was all finished, and she cut it and used it as a square of fabric. It looks gorgeous. So there are so many nice techniques with a simple, easy lesson from your software. Make the size you can get in that hoop. think about what you want. Are you going to use some foam? Are you going to use batting? Do you want to use some fleece and some shrinky? What do you want to do to make this fabric fun and exciting? And when you're using some of these, if you wanted to make like a pretty fabric that you wanted to utilize the decorative stitch as part of the fabric on, you could come in here and pick something that has an open and a closed look. So let's look at something. What am I talking about? Something like perhaps this. Let me see what this looks like. Okay, so this square is going to be very apparent. Now you could shrink your fabric up through this, and I guarantee you this would have a really nice smocked look. So be creative, play in your hoop, use an easy, make a shape and fill it. Have a good time. You can use any of our shapes. You could come in here and pick any of our fun shapes, our custom shapes in here, and you could do any of these in a quilted fabric, a puffy fabric. You could do them with shrink, using these shapes to do. The sky's the limit. You can have a lot of fun. If you wanted to make the bear, there's a bear in here somewhere, there. If you wanted to make this bear, and you wanted to make him puffy, make him have some life to him, you could take this, go ahead and put some batting behind it, stitch around it, then you could come back, you've got that going, and then come back and turn this into an applique, and applique this down with texture, with having some life to this bear. He's three-dimensional instead of one-dimensional. So there's a whole lot of things you can do if you just come and play. Play with some of your scraps of fabric that aren't so hot that you don't know why you bought them. Put them in your hoop. Use some decorative stitching over them. Puff them up. Shrink them up. Try some of these different techniques using some of the metallic threads. Use our variegated thread, our twist thread. Have some fun. Be creative. Create your own fabric and do some of these bags and stuff that are online. All this kind of stuff that you might want to construct on your serger, but you need the fabric. So let's make fabric in our hoop. I look forward to seeing you next week. I know it was an easy, simple lesson, but sometimes these are the ones that escape us the most. Have a great week. I'll see you in Houston. I'm on my way to market. I look forward to it, and if not, I'll be up at Quality Sewing in Puyallup the 2nd of November. Look forward to seeing any of you there at a hands-on class. Bye-bye. See you next week.